Good morning. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
All right. So, any questions over the readings? What are we talking about today? Reagan. Any questions? You guys want to go ahead and just dive straight into the quiz? All right. And here we go. Okay, so how did Reagan deal with the Soviet Union?
The Allies just tried to persuade them that they wouldn't be able to match us and that he was going to build our military to be so great that they wouldn't stand a chance.
Okay, so he portrays them as the evil empire. He says, we are stronger than you, we will defeat you, and so you might as well go ahead and give up, right? And so this is, for 8 years, this is his premise, that communism is not better than capitalism, and capitalism will win out. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the beginning. Back in 1980, so I want to go back and think about what is happening every single day on the news in 1980.
People that are being held captive.
All right, the Iran hostage crisis. Every single day, the news says this is day 400 and whatever of the hostage crisis situation, right? So, who is the Democratic nominee? Carter. They renominate Carter even though you have this hostage crisis thing going on every day. Ted Kennedy decides he is going to compete with him for the election. Who is Ted Kennedy? He is a Kennedy. He is a third brother, the youngest brother of the Kennedy clan. Now, I will admit, were I a Kennedy, I think I would consider very strongly not running for a national political position. You had two brothers who died. I'd be like, you know what, maybe I'll just be a senator somewhere and be happy. But Ted Kennedy wants to run. He challenges Carter, but he loses. And this really, really ticks him off. And so he says, I don't want anything to do with Carter. I'm not supporting you. And so, again, you have some friction within the Democratic Party. The Republicans nominate a movie star actor who actually was a Democrat until 1962 as their presidential candidate. So, Ronald Reagan, right? When Reagan gets the nomination, he briefly considers selecting Ford as his running mate. Do you see any problems with that? What might be a problem?
He wasn't very popular.
Okay, Ford's not very popular. And what did Ford do before this?
Watergate.
Well,
Yeah.
so he pardoned Nixon, and what position was he in?
President.
He was a president. So do you want to go from being the president of the U.S. to being the vice president? I mean, it's a little awkward. What do you call this guy? Do you call him Mr. President, Vice President, right? And so Reagan's like, okay, that's just not going to work. So he grabs George H.W. Bush. H.W. Bush is going to get the East Coast, the Texans, while Reagan thinks that he will be able to get California and some of the other people. So he promises, I'm going to cut government, I'm going to cut taxes, I'm going to support a conservative values, and I'm going to build up the military. How does this compare to Carter? Carter says you need to reduce your want list, right? So this is like at Christmas. One candidate comes up to you and says, hey, for Christmas, you're just going to get one gift this year. And the other says, you know what? Any gifts you want, I'll take care of, right? So this becomes a big push between Reagan and Carter. John Anderson runs. He is not as significant as you might think. If you notice, he takes no states. Reagan wins overwhelmingly. He's got 50% of the vote. Carter gets 41%. And over here, it's even more significant, 489 to 49 electoral votes. So on the electoral votes, Reagan comes up almost 10 times more than Carter does. So the other thing that's really fascinating is during 1979, 1980, the Shah dies. Now, why is Iran mad? Why did Iran take the hostages and hold them?
Because he came in and was like, hey, this is the person that we're going to give to run your nation. And they're like, we don't want him.
Yeah. So they're all angry about the Shah, and they've overthrown the Shah, and he's in the US to get cancer treatments. So we're super angry about the Shah being in the US. Once the Shah dies, what can the US give them that they want?
His money.
Okay, his money. But realistically, the big fight is over, right? Then you have Iraq actually starts a war with Iran. And Iran's like, okay, we're in the middle of a war. We need money. We need worldwide support. We don't want to have everyone hate us anymore. So now we got to get out of this thing. So they tell Carter, hey, look, you have $8.1 billion in Iranian assets sitting in the US that we can't use. We're not going to ask you to give us any more money. Just unfreeze our money and give it back to us. And we'll release the hostages. So they make this deal. They agree finally the Friday before the inauguration. Right? Carter releases the money. It goes to a Middle Eastern country. The Middle Eastern country does not work on Fridays, and so things jam up. It doesn't get released until Inauguration Day. So at 8:28 a.m., the day that Reagan is inaugurated, the hostages are released from Iran. So what do you think it appears like on TV? Reagan stands up, he takes the oath of office, and the next scenes that you see that are national level scenes are the Iranian hostages being released in Germany.
As if Reagan was responsible for it.
Yes. So everyone says, wow, Carter was president and 444 days he couldn't do a thing. Reagan becomes president and within minutes the hostages are released. Right? So Reagan gets this huge boost of confidence because everybody's like, wow, Carter couldn't pull this off, but Reagan did. The hostages are actually released because of Carter's actions, but because of the timing, it looks like Reagan does it. Now, what does Reagan want to do as president? He has Reaganomics. Has anybody ever heard of Reaganomics? Okay, one person. My wife and I actually talked about it because I'm like, wow, I'm already at a Reagan. I'm really close to the current time. And then we talked about it's over 40 years, so then I had to back off. All right, so he's going to have a tax cut which will stimulate growth in factories and spending. Then he's going to have government cuts of $39 billion. He's going to reduce government regulations, which makes it easier for factories to do things and get products out that people can buy. And he's going to tighten the money supply so that the value of a dollar is worth more, right? So, does this work? It's a trick question.
Yes.
No one knows. The reason no one knows is because we never actually do it. We wind up doing the tax cut, but when have you seen the government ever cut spending?
Never.
Never. Not in our lifetime. And shockingly, they don't cut spending in the 80s either. So what we do is we cut taxes, but we continue to spend loads and loads of money. And then when we do this nonsense, what does that occur? What occurs?
What was the question again? Say it again.
When we cut taxes but continue spending, what happens?
Less and less money comes from the public, so it's
Yeah,
gotta make it up somewhere.
there is no government tree of money, right? It's all tax money. So when we stop paying taxes but they keep spending, we just borrow money. And so the money we borrow, there's a tripling of the national debt. And so he does increase the size of the military. He does improve the weapons that the military has. And the economy finally recovers from stagflation. So those are positives. However, because of all this increase in debt, people start worrying. They're like, wait a minute, this is crazy. We have to get spending under control. So the Gramm-Rudman Act says you cannot spend more than you bring in. You cannot have a budget that is greater than tax income. And everyone knows that the Senate obeys laws, right? So what does the Senate do? After this, the Senate says, oh, okay, we will never have a budget that is greater than our tax money. However, Social Security is going to be off the books. And all of a sudden they start pulling all sorts of things off the books. So that would be like me saying, hey, my wife and I have agreed we are not going to spend any more money than we bring in. But we're going to take the mortgage off the table, we're going to take groceries off the table, and we're going to take car payments off the table. Now, is that realistic? No, because at this point, you are violating the intent of the law, and you're spending way more than we should, which is why now all of you guys owe, if I remember right, the last I heard is everybody in this room owes more than $85,000 to pay off the national debt. So I'd really appreciate if you could cover your edge, and we'll take care of that. All right, so what does he do with foreign policy? We kind of talked about it already. I was going to have a video here, and sadly I can't pull it off right now. But he talks about the evil empire. Now, in his speeches, he compares the Soviet Union to Hitler. Why would he compare the Soviet Union to Hitler?
It's a scare tactic.
There you go. Who is the most hated person on Earth right now?
Right now or
Well, at this point, and even now, I mean, if you want to be really, really rude to somebody, you call them Nazis, right? So they are like the vilifying group of people. If you want to say somebody's evil, then you call them Nazis, you call them Hitler. And so he's like, yeah, the Soviet Union is like Hitler. They are just keeping on grabbing and grabbing. When he calls them the evil empire, I want you to think about this for a while. What movie came out in 1979, I think, that everybody would know about that has an evil empire? Star Wars. Yeah. So how many people in the U.S. in the early 1980s know about Star Wars? Yeah, unless you were hiding in a barn somewhere, you know about Star Wars, right? Most people have seen it. If you haven't seen it, you at least know about it. So why would he say the Soviet Union is the evil empire?
Connect with younger people who are watching the movies.
Yeah, connect. So now you see Darth Vader supporting the Soviet Union, right? Now you see the emperor, this ugly guy who is all out for greed, and this is equivalent to the Soviet Union. So do you see what is Reagan's past job?
Actor.
He's an actor. He is a great communicator. As president, that is his nickname, is the great communicator. Do you see why we call him the great communicator? What is he doing here? He is painting a picture, right? So you walk off with the picture that he wants you to see. You see the Soviet Union as Hitler. You see the Soviet Union as the evil empire in Star Wars that the heroes have to go in and defeat. Even though it looks like it's impossible, the heroes defeat it and we win, right? And so how is he going to win? He builds a wing of MX missiles. Now, if you remember, Carter came up with these. They are 10 warheads that can be independently shot at different areas, targeted to different places. And so he builds a wing of MX missiles. Why does he do this? Does he do this because he wants to destroy the world? No, he's actually really nervous about nuclear war, and he doesn't want to get to nuclear war. But he believes very strongly that the best way to not have a nuclear war is the same way Teddy Roosevelt thought about corruption, right? I will be strong, and if I'm strong enough, nobody's going to mess with me, right? And so he builds the wing of MX missiles. He creates the Strategic Defense Initiative. What is SDI? It's called Star Wars as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that Star Wars?
Yeah, what is Star Wars? And by the way, what an incredible name for it, right? If you want to market something. Anybody know what SDI does?
Stop nuclear bombs.
Yes. It's a way, supposedly, to have satellites that will shoot down nuclear missiles. So you are building the MX missile, which increases the U.S. nuclear capability at the same time that you are convincing the Soviets that you have a system that will shut down their missiles. What is the intent in his mind here? What is he convincing the U.S. and the Soviet Union of?
If you shoot a missile, we have the ability to shoot it down.
Okay, you don't have any ability to harm our missiles, so we can shoot you, but we can shoot your missiles down so you don't have the capability to respond. This terrifies the Soviet Union. Now, what is the credibility of Strategic Defense Initiative? Did it ever get built? No. And many people don't believe it could have been built at that time, right? So why would he spend loads of money on a system that most people didn't believe would work?
Outspend the Soviets.
Okay, so again, let's think about what is his background?
Actor.
He's an actor. And what is he? He's already sold the U.S. on the evil empire, right? What is he selling to the Soviet Union? You can't win. We have something and we will defeat you and you can't win. And so they start spending money like everything, trying to catch up, trying to come up with a feasible alternative, and they struggle with this. So once they are overwhelmed, they say, okay, you know what? Let's go have another treaty. We'll get rid of all our intermediate nuclear missiles if you will just stop working on SDI and stuff. And Reagan winds up saying, nope, we're going to continue working on SDI. But they do wind up getting rid of the intermediate nuclear forces. So those are forces that would launch nuclear missiles into Europe or from Europe into the Soviet Union. So we get rid of the threat to Europe. The other thing he does, because he is super anti-communist, down in Nicaragua, they have a Sandinista government, and it is a socialist government, it is a communist government, and so there are some Contra rebels, and they are fighting with this socialist government, and so he starts sending loads and loads of money, advisors, and weapons down to help the Contras. At the same time, in other very close nations like Guatemala, you have socialist rebels who are trying to overthrow the government. The government is it's a dictatorship, it's a very hostile government, but we support the government in those countries because they are not communist. So it's basically, are you communist, are you not communist? He goes back away from Jimmy Carter's thought of humanitarianism, and he's like, nope, we're going back to communism. Some of the other things that happen, we decide Libya is supporting terrorism. They have given support to terrorists up to that point. They've taken over ships. They've taken over planes. We threaten them and they say, hey, don't mess with us. If you do, we will kill more people. And the next thing that happens is a bomb goes off in a discotheque in Germany where U.S. forces are. It kills a couple of people. And Reagan says, okay, this is too far. We go ahead and bomb Libya. And Libya's like, okay, I get it. we'll back off. Then in Lebanon, we've sent people to help the Lebanese civil war and try to calm things down. This is when you start to see terrorism change. Prior to this, what you see with terrorism is, hey, I'm going to take over the plane. Everybody's going to be a little nervous. And then we give you money. We give you whatever you want. And at the end of the day, we land the plane. Everybody goes away. So, you know, your life was inconvenienced for a few hours. But other than that, it's just kind of okay, right? When we finally get into Lebanon, you see guys driving trucks up to the barracks where the U.S. soldiers and Marines, actually are Marines, are living, and they blow up the Marine barracks. 241 Marines are killed. And Reagan says, you know what? I am here to help this country. If you don't want our help, then we're out. And so he pulls the Marines out. So what you see over and over with Reagan's foreign policy is I am going to be strong, I am going to push, I am going to engage where I'm going to win. So as soon as he pulls out of Lebanon, within a few days, we actually wind up taking over a little island in the Atlantic, in fact, real close to the Gulf. And has anybody ever seen Grenada? Do you know where Grenada is? All right. So why would we attack Grenada?
Is it by Cuba?
It is near Cuba. It's south of there, but and in fact, it's really close to the South American border, or the continent. And so, but yes, they have now gotten a socialist government, and they are saying we're going to help Cuba and we're going to help the Soviet Union. So they start to build this really long runway. If you see a really small island that really has nothing on it of major international value, and they're building this long runway, what do you think might be happening if they are socialist and they've already tied to Cuba and the Soviet Union?
Planes with missiles and stuff are going to be
Yeah.
landing there.
So Reagan really believes that the communists are going to be shipping a lot of stuff into Grenada and moving it into South America and Central America. So he says, we're not going to stand for this. There are U.S. Medical students down at Grenada, and I really feel bad. My parents weren't good enough to help me know that I could have gone to med school in an island down near the equator. They actually wanted me to get a job, so it's crazy. But you have all these students down there, so we decide we are going to protect the students. We go in and overthrow the government. The students actually are not, for the most part, don't even realize that they are being threatened. So we go in, we save them, we help out some other countries by saving their folks, and then we replace the government with a government that we like better. All right, so what about domestic policy? The first one is something that we have been struggling with for decades: immigration reform. How much does Congress want to deal with immigration reform? All right. In your lifetime, how many laws have been passed to change immigration? None. What does that tell you? Yeah, everybody likes to talk about it. Nobody wants to do anything. Why?
It's a loss for whoever.
Okay, no matter what you do, it's going to tick somebody off, right? So whatever act you take, somebody is going to be offended. And does Congress want to offend anybody? No. So they're like, okay, we're just not going to do anything. Reagan comes up with the Immigration Reform and Control Act. In the Immigration and Control Act, Reform and Control Act, he says anybody who entered the U.S. before 1982, you go ahead and you will have a path to legalization. You will have path to citizenship, right? Then he passes an executive order that basically allows the children to have a path to citizenship. And he says, you guys are citizens because you were brought over as children. He says, I will agree to this if we do two other things. Let's increase the border security, right? And instead of punishing the immigrants, we punish the people who employ the immigrants. Now, why do you think Reagan comes up with this policy? What's it going to do differently for him?
This is an aims to stop people from smuggling people across borders.
Yeah. So if no one will hire the immigrants who are smuggled across the border, then is there going to be a significant level of immigration that's illegal? Is there going to be people smuggling people over?
No, not if they can't do that.
Yeah. It will presumably drop the number of people who are being smuggled over significantly, because they will say, well, I won't be able to get a job, I won't be able to have any support, so that's not going to be something I need to do. Now, ready for the question again? Does this work? Exactly. It's a trick question. We have no idea. Why?
So we have no proof that it worked and have no proof that it didn't.
All right, so all of the people that came here before 1982 were given a path to citizenship. The border, was the border more secure? No, because Congress said, no, we're not going to do that. Then sanctions on employers. Did Congress actually start imposing sanctions on employers? No. So what happened is you had a lot of people who said, hey, you came here illegally, but we're going to give you citizenship. And now loads of people say, well, okay, there's still jobs, there's still opportunities, so there is no negative to us coming here illegally. Why do we want to take the 7 to 11 year process to go through the appropriate processes? Why don't we just go ahead and come over, we'll be smuggled in, and then we can do whatever we want. Now, there are, and I will give you, there are people who are coming over as refugees. There is a methodology for that. So there is loads of ways that people can come into the U.S., but we have no idea if this would work because it never is tried. All right. One thing that does work, although probably pretty harsh, the air traffic controllers decide that they have their work conditions are too difficult and they want raises. So they say, all right, we are going on strike. Again, what you see, I think Reagan is very similar to Roosevelt, right? Reagan says, I'm not dealing with this. You're not going on strike. And they start the strike. When they do, he fires every single air traffic controller. Now, what happens to all of the airports across the U.S.? If you don't have air traffic controllers, can you fly in and out of airports? No. So what does he have to do? He replaces all of the air traffic controllers with military air traffic controllers. Does that make sense? Are they qualified? Yes, they actually are, because they are air traffic controllers. They're doing the same thing with military aircraft as you do with civilian aircraft. So he says they can do the job. If you were not working on the day of the strike, if you called in sick, you were fired and you are no longer allowed to work as an air traffic controller, which again is pretty harsh. All of these guys who have years of experience are now told, sorry, go do something else. Now, I think it's ironic, after this point, they name the Washington airport the Ronald Reagan Airport. So the guy that fires all of the air traffic controllers now has an airport named after him. All right, AIDS starts coming up. What happens with AIDS? What is AIDS?
Sexually transmitted disease.
Okay, it's a sexually transmitted disease. It is primarily transmitted through drugs or homosexual sex. And so the first thing Reagan does is say, hey, don't have sex with someone you don't know. Which I will say, in the age of COVID, is not that big an ask, right? I mean, we were asked to wear masks and, take shots. Saying, hey, don't have sex with somebody you don't know, not a huge ask. But people were furious and they were like, you can't tell us who we can have sex with and who we can't. Then, because people didn't know how it was transmitted, it's transmitted through blood fluids. And so the blood donations started to get infected with AIDS. And so you have a broader concern. While Reagan does not do a whole lot like that is seen, he quietly accelerates opportunities for new drugs for AIDS and tries to make sure that we have opportunities. Some people say he didn't do enough. Again, I guess to me, I think we do know how to reduce the spread of AIDS. And so he tried to say, hey, use wisdom in what you're doing. And, if you're going to have sex, use condoms. But people didn't want to do that. All right. He put sanctions on South Africa over apartheid. And he also selects our first Supreme Court justice who was a woman, Sandra Day O'Connor. All right. So everybody loves Reagan, right? Lots of people love him. But you have this guy named John Hinckley. John Hinckley decides that he likes Jodie Foster. Does anybody know who Jodie Foster is? All right, got one person. Nobody knows Jodie Foster. All right, she's an actress. You can go look up her movies. So I want to know from all the ladies in here, you're trying to think of your perfect guy, right? So put your perfect guy in your head. Is there any part of that perfect guy where you're like, I really wish he would shoot the president of the U.S.? Now that would really make me excited about this guy. Nobody? No. I don't know why John Hinckley Jr. thinks this, but he thinks, I really like Jodie Foster. She's attractive, she's this actress, everybody knows her. You know what? The way I will get her to like me is to shoot Reagan. Right? So he decides to shoot Reagan. He catches him near the Washington Hilton and he shoots him 6 times with the .22. Now, I have been told that I am trying to give you guys advice on how to kill the president. That is not my intent. But if you're going to shoot somebody, maybe you should shoot them with a gun a little larger caliber than a .22, right? So at the end of the day, he shoots him 6 times, but he does not kill him. In fact, one of the bullets goes into Bill Brady, who is he's like the guy who does all the news stuff. Long story short, Bill Brady is injured much more than Reagan is. This is when Reagan uses his actor skills, and he is hustled to the hospital. The press is there as he is, going in. He tells the doctors who are going to do the surgery, "I hope you're Republicans." Why? What does that do?
Because they might let him die if they're not.
Yes, he's trying to be funny. He's trying to get everybody kind of calm down. And he's like, "Hey, I hope you're Republicans because, yeah, if you're a Democrat, you might let me die. But if you're a Republican, you're going to work your hardest." Then Mrs. Reagan comes in, Nancy Reagan comes in, and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" And he says, "I should have ducked." So again, he's kind of deflecting, kind of making a big, this is not a big deal. And so James Brady is injured much worse. He winds up being hospitalized and paralyzed. And so this is when you see the Brady bill passed. There is a waiting period to buy a handgun, and you have to have a background check. Why do you think that they wanted a background check and a waiting period? I mean, one, you have the crazy lady who tried to shoot Ford, right? And now you have John Hinckley Jr., who decides, "Oh, I'm going to shoot the president." And they're like, "We should have checked into his background. This guy's a nut. He shouldn't have had a gun. And we should have made him wait so that people could kind of check into it and find out what's going on." All right. Now, it is 1984. Do people like Reagan? Yeah. Almost everybody. There's loads and loads of people who really are like, Reagan is a good guy. He has got the Soviet Union on the ropes. Everything is kind of working. And so he's like, "We got it." I will ask if you guys would not be on your computers, because I got about half the classroom not paying attention right now, and I'd really rather not have that. All right. So when Reagan runs for his second term in office, what does he say?
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? For the most part, what is the answer to that question across America?
Yes.
Yes. When he enters office, we're still dealing with stagflation. By this time, the economy is rolling. Everything is going pretty good. The Democrats nominated a guy named Walter Mondale. Mondale is Carter's vice president. He is well known. He decides that he wants to get the first woman vice president. Right? So he selects a lady named Geraldine Ferraro. She is well known. She is a politician who has been around for a while. And as the campaign goes along, it's discovered that her husband, who has a lot of financial dealings in real estate, is doing some pretty corrupt things. This is her downfall. This is where she blows it. So when you come up to somebody and you say, "Hey, it appears that your husband is doing corrupt things and illegal things," what would you expect a vice president to say?
I'm not my husband.
Well, actually, that's what she does say, and it really hurts her. Because I guess I would expect, "Hey, this is not true," or "I'll look into that and make sure, but we will, if it is correct, we will get this stopped," right? But she says, "You know what? That's his money, and I really don't pay attention. I'm just his wife, and so I really don't know what he does with his money." Now, would that be acceptable for a male to say? It's just my wife's money, and I really don't know if she's corrupt or not, but, I'm just her husband, and I don't pay attention to the money.
It would be different at that time, but today I think it's
Okay.
Like,
I just don't think any guy would get by with that. And everybody's like, wait a minute. Are you saying that you want to be the vice president of the US, but haha, I really don't pay attention to our money at home because my husband takes care of everything? It's like, whoa, what? If you want to be the vice president, then you need to make sure that you know what's going on. And don't tell us that you don't know things because, well, you're just a woman and it's really not important for you to know things, right? And so this really shoots her in the foot. Reagan winds up with 59% of the popular vote. And again, 525 versus 13 electoral votes. So Mondale gets his home state of Minnesota and DC. So really, really hard shellacking, right? All right, once he is the president for his second term, Reagan starts to have some other issues. So if you remember, what is going on in terms of the Contras?
They're rebelling.
Okay, the Contras are rebelling against the Nicaraguan Sandinista government. The Sandinistans are very frustrated. And Congress starts to roll in and they say, hey, you're not going to support the Contras anymore. They are not a good group of people. They are doing bad things. And so you have to cut their funding, right? Does Reagan want to cut their funding? No. Reagan is like, we have to support anybody that is against communism. So Reagan decides we're going to go ahead and continue to support them. Now, what's the problem with that? What did Congress just tell him? Stop supporting the Contras. And they put it in a law. So can the president disobey a law? No. That's something we learned under Nixon, right? And that's an impeachable offense, correct? Okay, so how does Reagan get around this?
Tell somebody else to break the law.
Okay, Reagan supposedly, and we don't know exactly what happened, but Reagan's administration says, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take action. So the Iranians have held 7 Americans in Lebanon. And they are saying, hey, you're going to give us money and we will release the hostages. What is the U.S. policy about paying for hostages? This goes back to Thomas Jefferson when he says, thousands for defense, but not 1 cent to pay people to protect our citizens, right? And so since Thomas Jefferson, we're like, we do not give you money to pay off getting our hostages back. So they have these 7 citizens. Iran then says, hey, we would like some weapons. Now, that's the other thing. Can we give weapons to Iran? Because they held our hostages and we said we're not going to have any relationship with them. We don't have an embassy in Iran. We don't have any positive relationship with them at all, right? So how can you sell them weapons?
Secretly.
Okay. So what we do is we go to Israel and we say, we're going to sell you weapons because that's legal. We want you to sell those weapons to the Iranians for a lot more money. The extra money that the Iranians pay will not go to you or us, it will go to the Contras. Now, do you guys see any problems with this legally?
Yeah, they're using a middleman to do illegal
Yes.
things.
So you are violating the law by selling weapons to Iran, right? You're violating the law by getting money to the Contras. So there are two absolute illegal acts that are going on, and you're using Israel to manipulate things so that it won't be traced back to you, correct? So now we have a problem. We sell the missiles to Iran for 30 million. 18 million is now sent to the Contras. 3 hostages are released. And then almost immediately they grab 3 more hostages. So did it do any good for us in our relationship with Iran? No. The Iranians now have weapons that they wouldn't have had. Who do they use those weapons against? I mean, as far as we know, they would use those weapons against us or Israel, right? Because they are still calling us the great Satan. They are still saying that we are evil and we are doing horrible things. Now, presumably, they will be using them against Iraq, but there's no guarantee of this. And so that's why Congress is like, okay, we're not playing this game. There's an independent counsel that is selected that starts investigating what happened with this money transfer, right? All right, so what I want you guys to do is, let's go ahead and divide up again. If you think Reagan should have been impeached, over on this side. If you think Reagan should not have been impeached, over on this side.
So yes and no?
Yes, no. So this is a little tougher one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we basing off of this?
Based on the fact his administration has sold weapons to Iran and given the money to the Contras. All right. So what I want you guys to do is come up, what are the reasons that you would impeach him? Right? What are the reasons you would not impeach him?
Yeah.
If we were basing it off of the reasons that there's no knowledge that knowledge is what we're like talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Do you guys have like what?
Yeah.
Do you have like a third one? We didn't accomplish. Kind of hard to prove from us. I feel like that could be figured this too if we figure out.
All right, you guys have your thoughts? Go ahead and write them.
Who is the previous hand?
You have pretty handwriting.
You already saw that.
You gotta write again.
I'll go give it a shot.
Supply the enemy's weapons.
Yeah. Alright, a lot for it.
You don't want to write again?
No. I got bullied for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then what was it? What did he say?
Yeah, I'll have to.
It didn't accomplish anything? Did we say that?
He's already done a lot for the benefit of the country.
All right. So let's walk through these. You can go ahead and sit down. All right, so for the people who said we're not going to impeach Reagan, we say it's really hard to prove what happened, right? Is that a good reason to not impeach?
I think it is.
Okay,
Or the convicted person.
okay,
If they don't have any idea what's going on.
all right. And so you're saying, hey, Reagan may not have been aware of this, so, you can't impeach him for something that he didn't know about. He has popular support, so even though he broke the law, the American people supported what he did, right? And he has helped the country, so that kind of makes up for it. Now, I'm going to be really obnoxious here, right? The last person who left office, was it hard to prove that he had broken the law? At the beginning it was, right? Until they found the tape that was missing. Could they prove that he was involved? Never know. Did he have lots of popular support? Yeah. And had he helped the country? Yes. And his re-election was almost the same as Reagan's re-election, right? So it's really fascinating that both these presidents have their second election is outstandingly, in their favor. They take almost the entire U.S. and then they do stuff that creates problems. So what about those who think he should have been impeached? Why? He violated the law, right? Why did Nixon get impeached? He violated the law, right? And so he supplied the enemies with weapons, which, wow, supplying your enemy with weapons, is there a term for that? Treason? Right? And it didn't accomplish anything. I will admit, this one is, in my mind, going to be the weakest one. And I think it was your idea, the weakest one as well, because you're just like, hey, we've got to have a third one. But, so what does this tell you? Well, let's go ahead and we will talk about what actually occurs, right? So they start looking into it, they start investigating, and Reagan goes, I am just as shocked as you. Now, is there any possibility that someone in the Reagan administration would do something that goes against what Reagan wanted them to do? There is a possibility, but not a very big one, right? I mean, the chances of someone in the administration doing something that the president is not going to be happy about is pretty slim. Now, I will give you, there are opportunities for people to do things that the president would want done and maybe not tell the president because you want to give him some wiggle room to say, I didn't know, right? So as they start the investigation, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North says, you know what? This was my decision. I did it. Now, I have been at the Pentagon. I have actually had good friends that worked at the White House as military personnel. And I will give you, you get delegated a lot of authority. you don't get delegated this kind of authority. There is no way that Ollie North made the decision to do this on his own. It's insane to think that. He did not have that authority. However, what I do believe happened is someone said, hey, Ollie, this is going to look really bad. And I will admit, when I was military, one of the things that they teach you is be loyal, be loyal, be loyal. And I ticked off one of my, big bosses one point because my boss said, hey, this is the response you have to give. And the big boss looked at me and goes, okay, I get what your boss tells you to say. What do you think? And I was like, I can't tell you what I think. And he got really angry with me because he's like, you're not being loyal to the big organization, you're being loyal to your boss. You need to get over that. He was correct. I should have done a different thing. But I think this is what Ollie North is doing. He's like, you know what? I'll take the hit because it's better for me to take the hit than it is for it to start running up and get to the president. So Ollie North actually winds up losing his military career. He winds up going to prison, and there's a couple other people that are convicted as well. But at the end of the day, Reagan is like, I don't know anything about this. And nothing can be traced back to him. So what is the difference between Reagan and Nixon?
Nixon got impeached.
Okay. Nixon was impeached, and when he was impeached, he left office. Yeah.
Reagan also had people to back him up. That could be one point. Another point is he didn't have direct involvement with it, and I forgot his name already. Nixon
Yeah.
had, so that could be another point.
Yeah. Nixon's problems were he had the tapes, but the bigger problem is the people that work for him are like, I'm not going to prison for this guy. It really amazes me that Reagan had people who were like, yep, I will go to prison to make sure that you don't get taken out on this. Now, some people say that Reagan may not have known that by this time he was going senile because he was older. I don't know that I buy off on that. Some people say that Reagan delegated everything like Eisenhower did, and so he would have given overall, hey, I really want this to happen, but not given the details. So again, that's a possibility, right? But at the end of the day, is Reagan impeached? No. Now, I will go back and I will ask a couple of questions because we have impeached Nixon. We have now talked about impeaching Reagan. Then Clinton is impeached, right? And Trump is impeached. So while we're talking about impeachment, is impeachment about guilt or innocence? I got one no.
Wait, is it about guilt or innocence?
Yeah.
I mean, impeachment is about guilt. It's about putting them on the line for something that they feel they violated,
Okay.
right? And then he gets to prove his innocence.
So I will say, I believe that the initial intent of impeachment is proving guilt or innocence. I will tell you, and you guys have watched impeachment attempts, right? Sadly, I'm trying to think. There's probably maybe one person in here who knows about Clinton's impeachment. But under the Trump impeachment attempts, 2 attempts, was it about guilt or innocence?
I think they just didn't like him.
Okay. Realistically, what I have learned through my long decades of life is impeachment is truly about politics. We will get into it later, but Impeachment is about politics. The reason that Reagan is not impeached here is not because there's not enough evidence, because had they chosen, they could have gone ahead and pushed it and seen what they could find out. However, oops, look at this map. How many people want to go on record as trying to impeach Reagan? Nobody. You can't afford to. So it's all about politics, all about what can we do, how can we do things, right? All right. So let's go back and talk about a couple things. So since midterm, what are some of the things we have walked through? We started with the Cold War, right? What do we know about the Cold War?
Communism versus capitalism.
Okay, communism versus capitalism. Why is the U.S. concerned about communism?
Because they're afraid of going
The
to
sole goal is self-production.
All right, because we're really concerned that the goal of communism is to spread, overthrow all of the capitalist nations, correct? So, we get into a lot of conflicts over this, right? In the Cold War, you have the Korean conflict, you have Vietnam, you have the Contras, you have all sorts of different things that are going on, right? So when this occurs, where's Reagan in the Cold War? Okay, Reagan is toward the end, right? So what is Reagan's goal in the Cold War? So after Kennedy, when you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, everybody kind of backs off, right? Carter actually says, all right, you know what? Let's focus more on humanitarianism than we do on communism and the Cold War. But what does Reagan do?
He shifts the focus back to focusing on communism.
Okay, Reagan reignites the Cold War, right? He is re-pushing, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to fight the Cold War. So what happens in the Cold War soon after this?
They get a new president or leader, and it eventually falls apart.
Okay, so yeah, what we're going to see is as Reagan has ramped up the Cold War again, the Soviets are not able to keep up. Go ahead.
So are they going through an economic crisis by the time that he's like, all right, it's time that we're about to fight this again?
Yes, and in fact, many historians will tell you that the Soviet economic plan was going to fail initially. In fact, what was the concept of containment? That if we contain them from stealing other people's stuff, if we make them just live with what they have, they can't survive it. They won't be able to continue. And so now we're 50 years in, and the Cold War is, not working very well for them. And so Reagan kind of ramps up here. This is what we're going to do. And so we see this fall of the Soviet Union. It's interesting to me because I didn't get until recently. You guys are almost as far away from the Cold War as the Cold War lasted. Maybe my math's not good. I'm trying to think through it. You're as far away from Reagan, but you weren't born into the fears. You weren't born into the, oh my goodness, someone's going to, come and kill us. We are kind of moving into a second Cold War, right? So you will get to see a lot of the things. And I really do feel bad because now I'm looking around and I'm like, you guys are seeing stagflation. You are going to see the new Cold War. So you're seeing a lot of the things come back that we hadn't seen. All right. So what was the goal of Reaganomics? Okay, cut taxes, cut government spending,
Fund the military.
fund the military, tighten the dollar, access to the dollar, which is going to make the dollar stronger, right? So how well does it work? We have no idea. Because does it ever get tried? We cut taxes, we increase the debt incredibly because we keep spending, right? Now, I will give you 1982 through 1985, we start raising taxes. So we have no idea if it would work. I'm not sure, I want to go back and try it, but we have no idea. So how does Reagan deal with the Soviet Union?
Raising the military by a lot.
Okay, increasing the military. What does he call them?
An evil empire.
The evil empire. Why?
Because he's an actor trying to.
He's presenting a picture, right? He's like, this is the evil empire. We have to defeat them. And we're going to increase the size of our military. We are going to buy the new MX missiles and create a wing of MX missiles. And once we have the MX missiles, we are going to create SDI, right? So what is the intent? We're going to overwhelm them and we are going to win this conflict, right? All right. What is the Iran-Contra affair?
Secret arms deal.
Okay, a secret arms deal between whom and whom and whom?
Israel and Iran.
Okay, so we sell weapons to Israel, who then increases the price dramatically and sells them to Iran. Why would Israel sell them to Iran? I mean, Israel hates Iran, right? So why would Israel sell them to Iran?
The country that's protecting them told them to.
Yes, the country that's protecting them, the country that has been working with them, told them, hey, sell these weapons to Iran. Why do we want these weapons to go to Iran?
Because wait, no. Is it like we're supporting, or Reagan's supporting a country that the U.S. doesn't want him to, or was that?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
it?
So we want the money to go to the Contras. Can he legally give the money to the Contras? No. So he's got to have Iran send the money to the Contras so it can't be traced. And this is why people are feeling like he should be impeached, right? All right. So here are your questions for Wednesday.
Reading's 5 pages.
I know. Again, my frustration is the author of this book really, really cares about the early stuff, but the fall of the Union, Soviet Union is like, oh yeah, Soviet Union fell. This changes U.S. foreign policy and U.S. domestic policy dramatically. And so I want you guys to know what's going on. I want you to understand how does the Soviet Union fall, especially we are beginning a new Cold War, right? Who are we beginning a Cold War with? China,
Yeah.
right? And so if you guys are getting into a new Cold War, I want you to understand what worked in the last one. Let's go back, use history to actually understand what occurred. All right, so I will see you guys next class period. Have a good day.